what is up, you guys? It's Andy and Kat once again in our actually rather rare together, we call them together episodes, where we're actually, together doing an episode. I want to say that they're like few and far between now because each of us have been interviewing really great individuals in the space of whatever field that they're in, and we hardly actually even get to talk to each other anymore. So this is
Yep.
a big treat.
It is. It is. And we went through periods before where, but yeah, it seems like it's been a while since we talked, but
Yeah,
it's always good to get
it
together.
has. And so before coming on air, you and I were discussing the area of transfer of knowledge. Now, as consultants, we shouldn't, I mean, the approach that we should always be taking and that you and I have always been taking, like all throughout, but good consultants always work themselves out of a job, which seems counterintuitive because then it's kind of weird. It's like you try to work yourself out of the job. Like that's the whole entire point. And yet your clients, like if you're a good consultant, they always come back and ask you for more services.
Mm.
It's not to say that they always ask you for the same services, but they always ask you to help them with something new, right? And
Yes.
so part of that, in order for you to be successful and to be able to like not be bored with what you have, is such so that you can move on to other things. And part of that is the transfer of knowledge to somebody knowledgeable at the client site,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So, and it's interesting because now that I'm building an organization, there is a huge issue of transfer of knowledge to make sure that all of our consultants in our organization are top notch. I mean, we do a pretty good job of selecting individuals to join our team, but in order to, uphold that standard of consulting and even like as a self-employed consultant to uphold that standard of service of business with your client, there's got to be a lot of thought put into diligent transfer of knowledge.
Hmm. Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
So how do you do it? I'm curious to know.
I'm going to be honest, it's a battle, right? And I think as a consultant, and I'll speak for myself, but I'm kind of also speaking generally. This is, I think, one of the biggest challenges a consultant has. We like having the answer. We like getting to the answer. We like delivering the answer. We like being kind of that hero. I think we've had a podcast on it before. And so sometimes having that, we have to get out of that feeling of I have to have all the answers and I have to keep the answers. I have to be the one to deliver it. And so for me, what I try to do is I try to identify somebody in the organization that I work with. And in the past, it was always, I think it was easier back when I started, I found it was a lot more obvious who the person is that you're working with. I found as years have gone on, sometimes the clients don't have a dedicated resource to be that sort of, I'm going to say super user, that individual where we can transfer the knowledge to them and they can kind of be the quarterback and we can slowly, roll work over to them or roll knowledge and challenges over to them. I try to have them identify someone like that. Because I find there's a period where let's say for myself, I'm a big crutch for the client. I'm handling a lot of their challenges, a lot of the work that they're coming across or the issues they're dealing with. And then it becomes, okay, you have to identify someone to be sort of a mirror image of me that we can ramp up. So that's kind of the first step. I think if we don't have anybody to do a knowledge transfer to, that's going to be kind of that person we can kind of slide into our spot. It's going to be tough. So I try to find someone right away.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Right away. So help me understand
Well,
what do you mean by right away? Like at the beginning of the project or like throughout or somebody who's you've been working with that closely on the project? When does right away mean?
yeah, it's ideal through on the project, and usually they'll identify somebody to say, okay, this is your go-to person, and then what I found over the years, like in the past, again when I first started, at least one thing, you and I have almost the same exact career length, but
Mhm.
it's they usually had dedicated resources so that the people were assigned to the project outside of some abnormal event that would occur. They usually were dedicated to the project, and they were going to be that super user. They were expected to pick it up and deliver and be the kind of the voice of the client and the requirements and the testing and the training and all that stuff. And then they were going to be the one to kind of make sure that the system could stand up once the consultants would leave. But I found over the last few years, they would identify resources, but those resources were never really truly dedicated. Or,
Yeah.
or I think now, especially with virtual work, people can leave their jobs a lot sooner. So where, there's a lot more fluidity of employment. And so when I say, yeah, right away, the sooner the better. But I found the last few projects, it was late. It was sort of like after go live, as we're dealing challenges, we're saying, okay, we have to have somebody who is really committed to this. They're identified as that. They have the role. They're identified within the organization as being that person, and then we can share that knowledge. And
That's crazy to leave it till after go live because there's no history of having gone through the project. Like there's no knowledge of why why this configuration was done because of this particular business decision. There's no continuity of that. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah, and I think much of it, I think the clients, and this isn't to bash the clients. I think it's more just they aren't always aware of the magnitude of the work and the information and the knowledge and the change that's coming at them, and to have somebody who's identified to be that sort of play that role of again being that quarterback, the person that can drive that out. So then the longer that it takes to identify that person, the longer it takes to really transition out, share the knowledge, get things in place. And I find as a consultant, if my big thing is like I like helping people, but sometimes if you're doing really minuscule tasks and it's repeated where you're doing a lot of stuff that somebody should know, you're you know we want to solve bigger problems, and then that's really an awareness that there isn't something in place. There is either there's not an individual identified, or they're relying on you. And I kind of, maybe it's a bad analogy, but I always kind of refer to it being sort of that key role in a family, who often is the mom, right? Or they're playing the role of the mom. Mom, where's my shoes? Mom, where's my lunchbox? Mom, was the laundry done? Right? All of this stuff that kind of drives to one individual.
Mhm.
And really strong functioning groups, they spread that out. People are
Mhm.
responsible for themselves, and they're
Right.
really delegating that out. So
Yeah, and there's cross training as well. So
yes,
there's redundancy to some degree, such that
yes,
if somebody leaves the organization, and that has happened, like if
yeah,
you have one person, if you do not have any sort of cross training in your organization, you are really putting yourself and your team at significant risk
yes,
because that person has, I mean, to be blunt, has your team by the balls.
yes,
Like,
for sure. Yes,
right? If they
yes,
leave, that's pretty much it.
yes,
You have
absolutely.
to rebuild that.
Yes, that's right. And as consultants, I'm happy you brought that up, because as consultants, we we're our job, and this is where I think you and I, we try to keep reminding people, is our job is not just the technical things we're doing. So, and technical, not again breaking it out to say, okay, well, I'm a DBA or I'm a developer. I mean the things that we do. So if I'm a Oracle project accounting or project PPM resource, that's the technical thing that I'm delivering. That's why I'm hired
Mhm.
to go deliver
Mhm.
that. But there's a lot of consulting that we see. There's things that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis where we see gaps for the client. We can
Yeah.
mention that. We can say something like that, like, um, you know, if an employee is gone, let's say it's a long weekend, they left early, but we need some information. They say, well, Sally is away for the weekend. We'll have to wait till Wednesday when she comes back. Okay, that might happen once, but if it happens every time Sally is gone, we know that there's a gap.
Yeah.
Sally knows a lot of information that nobody else knows, and we can mention that and say, I think Sally needs to start transitioning some of this knowledge, even if she's an internal employee, because we can't be held up by one
No,
person.
exactly. And that's
So
right. So that's like a very person centric, which I hate to say it, but a lot of organizations sort of default to relying on particular individuals. And so part of an ERP implementation, I'd like to say, is first of all, this is interesting because this always comes up as questions when we take on new clients. And that is you're never really doing a lift and shift,
mhm.
right, for system processes. You want or for business processes. It's never that. Like you think that you are going to, yeah, we don't want to change the way we do the way we do business, right? And so they have this lift and shift mentality. Well, I think that's, to be honest, that's kind of lazy because
Yeah.
you're not really like there's a lot of very few organizations can say that they're like operating at top notch optimization and everything is highly efficient 100%. So there's always room for betterment, for making your business processes more efficient.
Mhm.
That's one. And then secondly, it is the transition from being people centric to being system centric. That's a
Mhm.
whole entire reason why you want to have something like a new enterprise resource planning system to help you manage that sort of thing, right? And so it would be natural to think that, any like all the Sallys of the world, if they're leaving and everything stops because they have left, to your point, it is 100% a gap that, well, we need to be able to systematize this information or this step or this cog in the process so that we don't have to be reliant on Sally.
Yes, that's right. Well, and you're 100% accurate. I mean, people will always say, "Well, what happens if that person dies?" And people go, "Oh, well, I
Or
knew a
hit by a
client."
bus. I don't know
Well,
why
here's
people
the
always like hit the. That's
yeah,
like the most.
yeah,
You either get
exactly,
hit by a bus or you get thrown
yeah,
under the bus, in
yeah,
which you would
exactly.
still get hit by the bus.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, I knew a client where that actually happened. They had a key resource. And it was interesting because, well, interesting, but he was a key resource. He was the person that managed one of the applications. Bachelor, lived with his mom. And the only reason I say this is that what ended up happening was he was walking home from work, and he had a heart attack. So he dies. And the mom, like, did not know. I mean, she knew who he worked for, but didn't know who to contact. So it was days. And so what ended up happening was, of course, he doesn't show up to work. Well, he typically did not miss work. So, and it definitely never did not call if he was missing. So a day goes by, next day they finally reach out. Well, they're shocked. Well, I mean, and the reason I say that is because, like even his mom is one step removed away from going, like, she doesn't even know to contact and who to
Right.
contact and say, hey, by the way, and she's dealing with the death of her son.
Right.
Anyway, so they had to like re-engineer the whole system, right? Like they had to take two people that actually they did not know how it worked, and it was heavily customized. They needed to get in and really look from the guts of the system all the way out to figure out how this system worked, what it was doing, so they could support it. And this was a huge company. So, it's something that when we look at this, is we always think of small companies as happening too, with, the owner knows everything and then something happens. But this can happen with a large company. And so you're 100% right. Like, we want to use the skills of the individual because, you know, there's the Michael Jordans and the Wayne Gretzky's and the individuals who are phenomenal, and it's great when a company has those phenomenal resources that they can use, and they've got special gifts. But to rely on them is dangerous because what happens when they leave? What happens if they're
Mm-hmm.
not there? What happens if they say, yeah, I need a week off, and there's a ton of information that they leave with and they're not in touch? And we can't build a system or a company around that one person. So,
No,
I mean,
exactly.
it's just sort of, I don't say foolish because it's a little harsh, but it's not definitely,
That's not
uh,
ideal for sure.
yes, yes, yeah, that's right. How about you? How about you? How do you kind of go about, like sharing that knowledge and,
So interestingly enough, this is actually going through my mind at this point in time is that not only, so when we think of transfer of knowledge, we think of, as you say, the technical stuff, right? Like the system stuff and the things that you have to, put on an Excel spreadsheet or anything, but it's actually more than that. It's like, it's for us, it is how are you a good consultant? What what do you do to uphold that standard of working with your clients to deliver that top level quality? And I mean, you don't have to be a consultant or have a consulting organization and work with external clients to have like to understand this, right? Like any position in an organization, like whatever you're doing in an organization, there's an element of system things that you have to do, right? There's an element of like tangible, spreadsheets or documents, or this is how it's done in the process to renegotiate for a particular contract or whatever have you. But there's also the people, the understanding of like how to work with people, who to talk to, honestly, like what drives them,
Mhm.
right? And we very seldom think, like we always think of transferred knowledge usually means all of those tangible things. But
Mhm.
rarely do we ever think about what are those intangibles that are actually contributing a lot to your success and your high level of quality delivery,
Mhm.
right? And
Yep.
so I was thinking about this, and so like I mean, for us, it's and okay, so with for us internally in our organization, right? We're developing courses for this and that. For clients, it's, the documentation of system, right? And having it, so there's a couple things like when you document a system, right? You want to have a tool that allows you to do this very easily. Why? Because if it's really hard to, there's a mental barrier in your head that it's like, oh, documentation. I hate documentation. And then, of course, then it's either not done to the very end and it's not done very well, and then you're going to miss stuff, right? And so if you have a really user-friendly tool to use when you're doing things, it's going to be like, oh, I can just like up and do it. So like there's a lot of tools out there, Loop is one of them, or Loom or Loop. I
Loom.
forgot. I think it's
Yep.
Loom. That's right.
Yep.
Loom is one of them. It tracks your mouse clicks, right? I love using Scribe How. Again, tracks your mouse clicks, creates really easy user instructions. So that's sort of the tangible piece, right? And so then you think of, so this is going to sound really sort of kind of weird coming from me, but the intangibles is also something that you have to kind of like document in that. And you have to be really a lot more careful about the documentation of these intangible things, right? Because you are dealing with how to work with people, what drives particular, individuals in an organization. And so you have to really be really careful about documenting, because if somebody else finds this information and doesn't understand where it's coming from, or you've documented it in such that, oh, Andy, if you want to get to Andy's good books, bring him a cinnamon
Mhm.
bun,
Yep. Yeah.
right? And
Two
honest to
would be
God,
good.
like the two would be good. You see.
Yeah.
So like I actually document personally what drives people.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I remember what things, and it's kind of like this, sort of personal CRM, right? CRM stands for client customer relationship management. And really I have this personal sort of, nobody gets to see it really. Like it's for me
Yeah.
basically, but it reminds me of what drives people. Like what so and so likes cricket. Okay, so
Mhm.
talk about cricket,
Yep.
or like so and so likes soccer. Okay, put together a soccer analogy if you're trying to understand or have explain something to that individual. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So like there's that stuff that is personally, like I personally do it. I don't necessarily like I'm very careful of sharing that information. And so usually when I do share it, it's quite well, it's verbal,
Mhm.
right? And then it's left to that person's own devices as to whether or not they want to retain that information in some way, somehow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
yeah,
now
absolutely.
like all the sneaky things that.
Oh, yeah. Well, well, and I think this gets into also the thoughts of sales, right? Great salesmen
Mm.
or great salespeople, they do that, and people think of it as being manipulative. And I guess in one way you could say it is, but it's not manipulative because it's what human beings, right? It's what
Mm-hmm.
human beings are looking for. We're looking
Yeah.
for connection. We're looking for these things, and people can tell right away if it's fake, right? If it's sort of like, hey, did
Yeah.
you see the Packers game last night? It's like, what
Yeah.
the, or whatever, like
I don't
where
care
you're
about
just,
Packers.
yeah, you're just,
Why are you
yeah,
talking
you're
to me
just,
about
yeah,
Packers?
you're just dropping like, dropping things, right? Um, but those things are key, and they're key actually, especially when you get to a place where where you know a lot of people, where you see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, right?
Exactly.
Because I know somebody, and I'll be careful about. He works for a professional sports franchise, and I know him on a personal basis. We never really talk about sports, but we were at a sports facility one time. We're sitting just having talking, and somebody walks by and says hi, and the guy says to me, he goes, "Hey, what's that guy's name?" I said, "I don't know what his name is." And he goes, he's looking at his phone. I said, "Why?" And he goes, "I write down who the person is and where I saw them and what time. And before I go to places, I will look through who I might run into because he said I'm in so many different cities." And he says he goes, "I'm actually really bad with names." He said, "I'm really bad with names and remembering things." He said, "So he said, like, I'll run into people and people will be like, they'll be like insulted that I won't remember who they are, or like
Yeah.
I'm." And so,
Hey,
yes,
you.
exactly. That's right. That was exactly it. So it's funny because I know him well. I know him really well. And so the funny thing is that my daughter is playing volleyball. Well, and she's playing volleyball near where this guy lives. And so he walks by, he's has his dog, and I said, "Hey, Tony." And he looks at me and goes, "Hey, how you doing?" I go, "Good." So I bring my daughter over, and I said, I'm thinking, he's trying to place me, right? Like he's thinking, because we're completely out of context.
Yeah.
Like we're in a parking lot. There's a gym and there's some houses, and so I told him, I said, "Hey," I said, to introduce my daughter. I said, "Oh, this is Tony," and I explained how we know each other, and it's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, hey
So
Andy." He
sweet.
goes, "Hey Andy, hey, 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 good."
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's
So
you.
all of a sudden it clicked, right? But it was like, I'm going, yeah, I feel for the guy, right? But collecting that information is important. But and and again, the good sales reps, it's not, and we think, well, Andy, I'm not in sales. Well, we're all in sales, right? Like we're all
Mm-hmm.
selling an idea, we're
Mm-hmm.
selling a thought, we're doing something. And even to get that information, like that's really good on you to gather that information, because um like there are places where, like some companies where, like I know it's becoming more and more common, where companies do not want confrontation. They don't want people raising their voice. They don't want people, they don't want that escalation of anxiety. Um, I see the benefit of that. I also see the downside of that. But regardless, that's their culture, and that's what they're trying to drive out. So even being aware of that, I know when I go into some meetings, hey, don't get, even if it's a spirited sort of conversation where I'm active and I sound upset, or I sound sort of, some people can take it as, hey, he's getting mad. Well, I'm actually not getting mad. I'm actually excited about this topic, but I'm engaged and I'm active. Um, and it's, you know, I'm kind of rambling here, but there was a CNN interview where there were two political analysts, and it looked like an argument. Like, and actually the one person had a very visible, like to me at least, it was visibly that they were upset about the way that this conversation was going. At the end of the conversation, the one analyst said, he said, "Can I have a moment?" He goes, "Me and he says, the other person, we've known each other for years." He said, "We've had great conversations. We've had dinners together. We know each other. We're friends." And he said, "We need to have more of these conversations where it becomes, where it looks like it's an argument, but it's not. We're friends, and this was not a fight." He says, "This is just a discussion around topics that we both feel very strongly about." And I thought it was good, because usually we avoid those things, and I'm kind of taking us down different avenue, but being aware of the fact that, these different examples are there, and then how do we share that, a kind of
Mm-hmm.
took us a completely different route. But but it's been a while since we talked, so we got a lot to talk about.
Exactly.
But I think it's good on you to keep that information. But you're right, to share that with others. Somebody would not understand the context of that, and they would go, "What is this? Like, why is this person tracking this information?" But it's a differentiator for you versus
Mhm.
other consultants for sure.
That's right. That's right. And so like in speaking of transfer of knowledge, like if you are um the classic example of transfer of knowledge is that you are leaving the project, leaving the client to go somewhere else, and then you're transferring all of this, know-how to the person your successor, whoever that may be, right? And so generally what would happen is that it's going to happen over the course of time. Like it's never just the one
Mhm.
session, right? And so what I would do is go through I always like to go from top to like from most general to more specific, right? So I
Mhm.
go through the whole entire, what the whole entire organization, or sorry, the whole entire, whatever it is, like overview of the business process, what that looks like in general. And then I'll dive down to what happens in each, like what we have done, what perhaps the issues are for why we had done what we had to do. And then at that point in time, I would be infusing like this person is involved, and it's very important. So the way I would coach that individual, again, it's never written down like in terms of what I've collected in my personal CRM, if you will, but I will share with my successor like what is important to the individual that is a part of this process,
Mhm. Yep.
right? And then maybe like in a joking sort of manner. And by the way, this person's vegetarian, so if you're going to bring him a snack,
Yeah.
don't bring him a meat snack.
Yeah.
Bring him some
A hot
carrots or
dog.
something.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's right.
don't bring him a hot dog. And that stuff is good to know,
Yes.
right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I sort of infuse it. Like again, it's never written down. It's just always very informal. But that I think that if you're not doing that, you're actually missing a big part of the intangible transfer of knowledge that person has to learn on her own.
Yep. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I always think of it as learning like the spirit of what we're doing, right? And
Mhm.
because often we teach everybody what to do, right? And we always will say, I want to know how to do it. But we're really teaching them what to do. That's really it's
Mhm.
not
Exactly.
because how to me is always more more deep. It's because how involves how do you think?
Right.
How are you
Yeah.
thinking?
Yeah.
Who are you involving? All of that kind of stuff. But you typically, when we're teaching like anything that's technical, it's always what, right? Okay, do this, enter this, do
Mhm.
this, do this, do this, like
Mhm.
it's a recipe. And if anybody knows how to, you can never replicate somebody's recipe. It's the same ingredients, the same steps, but it does not come out the same. It's always a little different. I mean, it's different. It doesn't mean that it's worse. It's just different. Well, why
Mhm.
is that? Well, because people are have a different how. They're coming in with a different spirit. Everything, each step is actually slightly different. How they think, who they're involving, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so actually that's a really great point. So going back to the intangibles, like what I would transfer is essentially like facts and not how I interpreted that, right? Like I would
Yep.
transfer the fact that, oh, this person who is, by the way, he's vegetarian, right? Because you can't dispute that. It's like
Yep.
it's not like the way that person made you feel or something. Like I leave all of that stuff out because that person's going to have a very different in a relationship with with this individual,
Yep. That's
right?
right.
So just like there's a little bit of tact you have to apply, a little bit of tact and a little bit of nuance to finesse to like how you transfer all those intangibles.
Yes, yes, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. I know when I'm trying to do any sort of knowledge transfer that I always try to break down the flow of
Mhm.
what we're doing. And I try this because I'm project, PPM or project accounting guy. I'll always start at what I always call the project conception, not the project inception,
Mhm.
because people say, well, the project inception starts when we, put the project in or we activate it. But to me, I always say, okay, project has been conceived. What does that mean, right? You've won a project. It's come from somewhere. Someone has identified a project, and then let's move through the flow of that, and then and trying to teach them around. And what I try to focus on is try to talk about the spirit of what we're doing. So what is it that we're really trying to do? Who are we involving? Um, what should they be aware of? And because once we take like with any process, once we sort of go step one, step two, step three, you usually are already spoken out. You already have a bunch of things that you need to decide on, a bunch of people we need to involve, a lot of information that now is already interrelated. And so, trying to connect all that and have that we're really trying to teach them for the most part how to think and how to think through the steps so that
Mm-hmm.
they're aware of, okay, I ran into this. It isn't so much necessarily go to the manual. It's sort of, how to think through because sometimes following instructions, it actually isn't the answer, right? It really is, okay, how do I problem solve this? What is it that I should do? And
Exactly.
yeah, so
Yeah. Okay, so cool. So, I mean, we talked about a lot of things, but let's sort of summarize for people to give them an action plan. Like, if you were to apply this in your life tomorrow, right? What are we going to recommend that you do in terms of like if you were to embark on this journey of transfer of knowledge with an individual, like your successor, whoever that may be?
yeah, yeah. I
What
think
should we do?
I think the first thing is identifying a person
Mhm.
or one or two people. I think too often companies will say transfer the knowledge and here's 15 people to go. Like, here's nobody or here's a huge group, right? And they're trying to do sort of this big peanut butter, approach where we're just going to like slap it back and forth and hopefully enough people pick it up and that we have a team that can
It's
sort of,
awful. It's like if
it's sort of
everybody's accountable, nobody's accountable.
nobody's accountable, right? And so I always say, you think, okay, you have to have, one or two people. It usually has to be one person who's the key individual, and then
And a
a
backup.
backup, yeah, and and identify that, and then start working through because I also think that, and then start working through in some sort of a pragmatic approach. I think somewhere at the beginning, right, and saying and really identifying, okay, where's our beginning? Because I think what ends up happening for a lot of knowledge when people are trying to gain a lot of knowledge, they're starting from where they think their beginning is, but their beginning is, I always think of, I got a piece of a puzzle from here and a piece of a puzzle from here, and I'm trying to lay this thing out and trying to complete a puzzle, and I don't even have the picture of the box. I don't even know what I'm actually building. I'm just got kind of a piece here and a piece here and a piece here, and we have to start at the beginning, and we have to identify a beginning and then work through and say, okay, how are we going to do this? I it's probably a bad analogy, but the alphabet is just a collection of letters, right? And Z, right, or Z, but Z or Z, we have it as the last letter of the alphabet. It doesn't need to be the last letter of the alphabet, but it could be the second letter of the alphabet. The reason we have the alphabet in order, outside of using it for some mathematical, approaches, but A, B, C, D, it doesn't matter. But it's easier to learn the alphabet if it's in a consistent order.
Order.
And right, and that we identify vowels and consonants. Okay, now I can take this and do something with it. Once we know the alphabet, I mean, do I know that P is the, I don't know, 14th letter of the alphabet? I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. It's irrelevant. All I do is I know when I'm trying to spell, right? But that's becomes more nonlinear thinking, right? Where we can take the letter P, which is down here, and the letter B here. It doesn't matter to me unless I'm trying to teach it to someone. But we can't get to nonlinear until we understand the linear,
The
until we
linear,
understand the
exactly.
steps. So understanding those steps and saying, okay, what is the beginning? What are we producing? What's the end? Who's involved? I think, but what tends to happen is we bounce here, bounce there, bounce there. So I would say pick a spot, pick a beginning, make sure it is the beginning. And because sometimes people go, well, my beginning is here. Okay, no, let's begin at the beginning and let's move through so that somebody gets an understanding of all the touch points and then go from there. I'd say that's probably another thing that sometimes people fail. They just go, just teach me what I need to know. Okay, no, let's start at the beginning. You're better off knowing it all, especially if they're a key resource, because the more they know about the whole process, the better. So
Actually, okay, so I actually do it the opposite way.
mm,
I would begin with the end in mind.
mm,
So, and that's why I had mentioned I'd always start with the whole entire business process. So this is
mm,
the desired outcome,
yeah,
and then I would go to the next level down, not necessarily working backwards per se, but if we establish what your entire, like what your desired outcome is, at the whole, then bring it down a level. This chunk is responsible for this particular area
mm,
of the process. And then this second chunk is responsible for this area of the process. And
mm,
so that's how I personally would would do it.
yeah,
And then everything, so just to recap, the first thing is to identify your successor or successors, and don't make it like 15 people, make it one or two.
yeah,
Secondly, pick a beginning, which is
yeah,
Andy's method, and for me, it's opposite. So for me, it's like begin with the end in mind, like
yeah.
have the whole entire picture, explain that, and then dive deep, like dive one level down and one level down. Then I would like to also encourage people to have, like, when you get to those granular levels, have a really low barrier way to assemble user instructions.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Yes. It can't be. I like that idea because I started to use Loom because I found even screenshots and stuff like that became too difficult. And so some stuff was, are we going to jump on for a 20-minute call, or can I create a 1.5 minute video that they can just follow? And I like that. I also like your good. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, Loom, doesn't it give you alternate modes of a media as well? Like if you create a video, doesn't it actually create user instructions for you?
I
Or
think so.
no?
I think there
Yeah.
might be. I haven't
Okay.
really, outside of the video stuff, I haven't really
Oh,
dug
okay.
in,
Okay,
but I think there is
gotcha.
some more capabilities. Yeah. Yes. And one thing I want to bridge on what you brought up before
Mhm.
too is getting deeper from the technical or the process or the what we're doing to the individuals involved.
Mhm.
I think that I think if a consultant or any resource can look and say, how does this impact different people? What do they like? You know, um, I think what that does too is that we get a better understanding of what the impact is to individuals. So,
Mhm.
I mean, like
Yeah.
you tracking, okay, this person likes soccer, this person likes this or that. It isn't just saying the person likes soccer. That's not that just it. It's the fact that Kat took the time to know something about that person. There's a level of awareness, who that person is, what are they thinking. So it's even that tangible or that intangible, tangible thing that you're aware of now that say, okay, this person likes soccer. There's other things that Kat has picked up through that process of being aware. It's not just they like soccer. There's other things that are being recognized. And I think that is a huge differentiator. Just that being aware, not just saying, hey, this is what I got to deliver. I deliver what they asked. Here's the scope. It's that awareness of, hey, there's all these people, there's all these things that are going on, and I can pick up unique things about individuals that's going to differentiate me from everybody else.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It's so easy for us to, especially those of us who are implementing systems, to just focus on the ones and the zeros and the system itself. But really at the end of the day, like you gotta remember, like what's the point of having that system? It's to support the humans,
Mm. Yes.
right? So that's
Yeah.
that's why I'm always, yeah, I don't know, like
Yeah.
it's always all about the humans.
Yes. Yay, humans. Yes.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah. let's keep the humans.
Great idea. All right, any final words?
No, I think that's a good place, but
The
yeah,
humans.
keep the humans.